Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the broadcast tonight. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Um, before you make your own introductory remarks, please grant me the indulgence for me to say a word or two um, about our colleagues who join us on this platform. Uh, Today will be 139 sessions. I must praise them because when I remember the number that started with us, we've gone up 800%. I know my mathematics is never good, so don't quote me on that. But I think we've gone up 800%. Now, I'm not a comedian. I'm not Davido. This is always a solid intellectual exercise. And yet, our colleagues have been constant. You know, it says something about this country, after all, that we will get such a consistent loyalty over very serious intellectual topics. And it just struck me as I sat here waiting for you to open the studio to us that when you think of that, then there is still hope for this country. This country is still worth fighting for. It's not going to be easy, but uh, I don't want to be religious about this, but you will recall that when Abraham was negotiating with God over Sodom and Gomorrah, and he kept, if there are 10 righteous people there, surely you won't destroy the place. And God said, no, I won't. If there are 8 righteous people, surely you won't destroy the place, until they came down to number 3. And I think Abraham decided not to push his luck further than that. I just think I'm so grateful, number one, for their presence every week. It emboldens me. Somebody once asked me last week, and the person is on our program. Why do I continue to be, troublesome? Instead of just putting my feet up, open a bottle of star beer or whatever it is that I drink, and some fried fish, in the evening, and yet I go through all this trouble of getting dressed, put on tie and everything, and then face an audience that are ready to challenge me if I get anything wrong. And I said, it's because they keep my brain alive, number one. And number two, they encourage me to continue until I die, making my own little contribution towards the future of Nigeria. I thought I would like to say that. I thank you very much, all of you who join us every week for this 139 sessions.
Thank you very much, sir. I was about, when you said you want to say a word of, I thought you wanted to start with a word of prayer. And then you now started quoting Abraham. So I was thinking, what happened to Prof between last week and this week? I was saying I wasn't prepared for this, so let me check my notes. Maybe I need to start to readjust that. But thank you very much, sir, for being there every week, week in, week out. Well, let's start with the United Kingdom. One, because I'm based here, and then number two, I think the last 2 sessions we were going to talk about the coronation that was coming up and how things were going to go, and we just kept saying, "Oh, let's wait until after that that happens." Sir, there have been mixed reactions about the event. But I'd like to hear your views about the event, sir, before we go to other topics tonight.
Okay. I will start with the parts of the ceremony that I feel positive about, so that nobody will accuse me of raining on anybody's parade. Pardon the pun, because I know it didn't rain, it poured on the parade, from the palace to the abbey and back to the palace. So let me start with the positive aspects that I admired. But let me make a confession to start with. I am a freak when it comes to military parades. It was a marvelous, spectacular show. Nobody does that parade like the British. I must say that. But let me, at the same time, introduce a personal caveat. I once had a brother who was in the army, who trained both at the NDA, National Defense Academy in Kaduna, and also trained at Sandhurst in England. And he told me, and he was a perfectionist when it comes to these things, he told me that they march better at the NDA than they do at Sandhurst. Well, since I didn't go to either, I'll take his word for it. But the British, they do these things like nobody does. So I was glued to my seat from 8 o'clock when the BBC started running the commentary until they closed the program. And I have also watched their repeat program since then. That was very well done. The king should be proud of his troops. Secondly, I am also proud of the multiculturalism that was exhibited in the Abbey, in that program. There's no need for one to be, sparse with the praise and admiration for what that signified. The signal is sent to the rest of the world. The signal may be wrong, but to me, the signal was in Britain, people of color are respected. They are recognized. They are given their pride of place. That's the signal that it sent. And it meant that King Charles has his hands on the ball. On a local note, if you want us to say that, well, we should be proud that our own Nigerian citizens had their pride of place. From Dame Anyanwu, who carried the orb, who's a dame, carried the orb. She's a professor of nursing. She's half Nigerian, half British. I suppose they call them Anglo-Nigerians, as you know. Then you had the chaplain to the Archbishop of Canterbury, who is from Kogi, who was with the Archbishop all throughout, making sure that the Archbishop was reading from whatever page he was supposed to be reading from. There are probably others that, I don't know whether they are Nigerians or not, but they were brown. They were our brothers, one embraced them. Then the Deputy Assistant Commissioner of Police in charge of operations, and that's usually quite a very high post. Again, it's a Nigerian or of Nigerian descent, because I don't know whether the ambassador would have this argument with me this week, whether we should actually be claiming them that they are British, that we shouldn't be claiming them to be Nigerians, that they don't claim to be Nigerian, and I'm saying they are Nigerians and so on. It's probably on the program. The police officer who was in charge of operations was of Nigerian descent. So we were also given prominent roles to play. So Those are my positive comments. Now to the negative ones. I have two negative comments. Number one, I didn't like the way Harry was treated. I think Prince Harry was treated very shabbily. There was a long debate about whether he would be invited to the ceremony. He was invited. Then there was some controversy about whether he will accept to come. He accepted to come. And then what happened? The palace decided that, number one, he should not put on his royal robes. I mean, the boy is a knight commander of the Victoria Order, which is one of the highest orders, and they have their purple robes. That has not been taken away from him, and yet he was told he couldn't wear those robes. Number two, this chap was a veteran of the Afghanistan war. He did 2 tours of duty. His medals were for active service. Those medals were not paid unto him because he was born a prince. He could have been killed by the Taliban. He could have been captured by the Taliban. He served 2 tours of duty, and yet the palace again told him that he couldn't wear his military uniform. I think that was despicable, what they did. And then you put him in the 3rd row with his cousins and non-performing royals. The 3rd row. He is the 2nd son of the king who was being coronated. I'm told that his father was not consulted about this, and that he didn't complain to the father, although he'd been in touch. He and the father had been having conversations, and that this was decided between the palace and Prince William, who is turning out to be, well, let me watch my mouth. But that those decisions were taken between them, I think that was despicable. And again, as I've said once on this program, Harry has been more sinned against than sinning. There was even an interview given by the Chief of General Staff, retired, when the 2 young boys were growing up. He said in a meeting with the Queen said she would love her 2 grandsons to serve in the armed forces, because other people's children were serving in the armed forces. But that since William was heir to the throne, maybe he will not be given combat duty. But that with Harry, it didn't matter if anything happened. Now, how will anybody like that to be said about him? That his life didn't matter. If he got killed, well, And that's what the boy meant by he was called a spare by his father. And now his grandmother was saying it didn't matter if he got killed in combat. After all, it was a spare tire. Is there any one of us on this program, this platform, whom, if that was the way his or her parents felt about him, will actually grow up not to be rebellious? So I didn't like that at all. And the second thing I didn't like was the way the British police treated those who were demonstrating against the coronation. I am a royalist, and I think that the coronation did not deserve to be disrupted. But there are ways of handling dissent, because freedom means the right to be in favor of and the right to be against. Everything done in moderation. The police could have said, right, those of you who are against the coronation, we will let you stay 800 yards away with your placards from the route being taken by the royalty. 800 yards, the king will hear no noise. And that distance, nobody could cover it without the police then immediately reacting. But instead, the police started arresting the demonstrators, their leaders, arresting their placards before they had even done anything. And the police claimed they had intelligence that they were planning to disrupt. Now, people who are served in government know that that is usually the excuse of, the security forces. We have intelligence. Of course, you couldn't query intelligence because you yourself, you are not in possession. And whether they are telling the truth or not, you don't know. Of course, now we know that they overreacted because they have released all the people without charging them to court. Why does this bother me? Because practically all over the world, whether in United States, whether in Pakistan, whether in India, whether in, remember, Hong Kong, whether in Nigeria, whether in South Africa, you have demonstrations all the time. And what we inherited from the British was that the right to demonstrate would be respected. I wasn't expecting that we will now be inheriting from the British the abolition of that right. Well, Amnesty International has criticized it. Human Rights Watch has criticized it. And there's nothing more I can now add to that. But given the state of the world and dissent in the world, I thought the British could have handled that better. So that's really what I have to say about the coronation. Long live the king.
Thank you, sir. I'll ask just one question about that. In the lead up to the event, a lot of people thought that the turnout was going to be low. There was a lot of talk in the press here about what the turnout was going to be like. Were you surprised by the show of support? And do you think that the turnout represents people, at least in the UK, who turned up, warming up to the monarchy, and maybe that's them just giving their support to the monarchy going forward?
You are stuck. You are frozen.
Can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you now. You are frozen for some time.
Oh, sorry, sir. My question was that in the lead up to the coronation, there was a lot of even some press outlets, media outlets, were saying that the support from the UK wasn't really there. People were not concerned about what the monarchy was going to be like in the future. But the turnout seemed to paint a slightly different picture. Were you surprised about that turnout?
No, I wasn't surprised about the turnout. Everybody loves a jolly good show. I'm sure there are people who are there because they were royalists. They were supporters of the king. And then there were people who were there because everybody loves a good show. That's why people, pay a lot of money to buy tickets to go to West End to go and see Phantom of the Opera, or Fiddler on the Roof, or whatever it is that is being played at the West End. So I don't think that we can use the turnout as an index of support for royalty, because the reason the press was saying the turnout may be low was because there were public opinion polls that showed that support for continuation of the royalty in Britain was not as high as when the Queen did her jubilee. What they didn't factor in was to ask the ancillary question, will you attend the parade? And there are people who came from all over the world, America, Australia, continental Europe, just to see. I just told you, I sat in my chair and watched the parade.
Thank you, sir. Let me start from the Middle East, sir, this evening as we go to different nations. One key piece of news that came out of the Middle East was the fact that Syria had been readmitted into the Arab League after 12 years of being out of it due to the war and some of the violations at the time. Number one, what do you think of that sound? What does this mean for Syria? Is this the beginning of reintegration, or is there some other political move that's going on here in terms of nations allowing Syria to join the Arab League? And it's caused quite a few reactions from different quarters. What's your take on that, sir?
Well, of course, it will cause, different reactions from Western countries. Number one, I think it's indicative of the decision by Iran and Saudi Arabia to now start to insulate the Middle East from whatever may be the antagonism between the United States, Russia, and perhaps China. Or let me put it in a more rounded fashion, to insulate the Middle East from the vagaries of American interests. They've probably come to the conclusion that the involvement of the United States in the Middle East has not served the interests of the Middle East. On the other hand, it has tended to serve the interests of the United States. And that, to that extent, time was right. It was like, we are tired of being used. We now want to define our national interests and what role each one of us will have to play. To that extent, we will bring in from the cold those Arab countries that may have been pushed into the cold because of American antagonism towards them. I have held the view, and I think there is empirical evidence to support this, that the so-called Arab Spring, we started from Tunisia, went all the way to Egypt, Libya, and then Syria. The Arab Spring was sponsored by the United States. please don't get me wrong. I will have no trouble with dictators. I think dictators deserve to be overthrown. Democracy, people deserve to have the right to choose their leaders. But the people should not be sponsored by outsiders whose interests at the end of the day will not serve the interests of the people. Is Libya any better today than when Gaddafi was there? The answer is no. And Syria lost thousands of people. Where did the opposition get their weapons? Until today, the northern part of Syria is occupied by the United States, Russia, Turkey. 3 countries are occupying the northern part of the. Is that what the Arab Spring in Syria? Is that what it was designed to achieve? No. So if the Syrians are going to fight for their rights, let it be something that they will do to the limit of their ability. So I think that's my own interpretation of the invitation for Syria to come back and resume its membership of the Arab League.
So how do you think that would impact diplomacy in that region, particularly with the United States, who, no surprises there, were saying they were not supportive of it, but other countries in that region also seemed not to be too supportive of it? What message is it sending out if after the so many years of war, you just allow these organizations or these countries back into groups like the Arab League? In my mind, I'm thinking of other countries that maybe have been suspended from whether it's the African Union, whether it's other groups, regional power structures like that. What do you think about that, sir?
Well, actually, the move may be more pro-peace than one would normally think, because the president of Syria may be more disposed to listen to a joint proposal by Saudi Arabia and Iran towards resolution of even the internal crisis of Syria than the resolutions that are passed by the United Nations or threats made by either Turkey or the United States or Russia or whatever other countries. Because at the back of the mind of the Syrian president will be that at least Arab countries will be motivated, will be driven by Arab interests. Well, you never can tell whether it's because United States and China are not getting along in Taiwan that United States then decides to do X, Y, Z in Syria, or whether because Syria is selling oil or buying oil from Russia is what is leading the United States to take a particular position. So I think that, and for us Africans who have always said African solutions are better in resolving African crises, we should be able to understand and embrace the development in the Middle East, where Arabs now are saying we want to take into our hands our own destiny.
So one question that comes to mind when one thinks of the Arab League, and we've talked about this in some other sessions, is the rise of Saudi Arabia as a mediator of sorts in the region. Because one of the things that we're seeing is that even in the case of Sudan, Saudi Arabia is pledging quite a substantial amount of money to Sudan to help with the crisis that's going on there, more from a humanitarian point of view rather than supporting any of the factions there. But we also know that even from the war in Sudan, Saudi Arabia is also still trying to play that mediator type role in there. And my question, Sari, is this: what is Saudi Arabia getting right about their diplomacy and their foreign policy?
Saudi Arabia is a medium power country, and it has finally decided that the time is right for it to actualize that status, to actualize that role, and stop doing things at the behest of other countries whose interests may actually deviate from its own. And it's something I can, having been a disciple of the medium power syndrome, is something which I could easily recognize, something which I embrace, is something which I applaud. Because, I mean, of course, you see, I mean, there is no move that will not have its yin and yang, its negative and its positive attributes. So one should not think that there will be no gains or that Saudi Arabia will not make mistakes. Saudi Arabia will make mistakes, but then so do all countries in the world make mistakes in the move that they make. And one simply hope, for the sake of Arabs, for the sake of the Mediterranean, that the role of Saudi Arabia in conjunction with Iran will be more beneficial to the Middle East than when outside forces were the ones who were, calling the shots.
Let me talk about Sudan, since we've talked about it briefly there. We heard that the two representatives of the two factions were in Saudi Arabia and trying to look for a way of bringing peace. But it appears that the two generals are not going to back down, because they've said, yes, they will accept a truce, but that's only for humanitarian purposes and not for the end of the war. What do you think could be done in Sudan to restore peace to Sudan?
The first time you raised this question, and the first time we discussed it here, I said that the struggle in Sudan is about power. It's not about morality. It's not about peace. It's about power. And until either both parties are so weakened that they come to the conclusion that there's no way forward, or until one party wins that war, there will not be peace. You see this in civil wars all over the world. Are you not seeing it? Although it's not a civil war situation, are you not seeing it in Russia versus Ukraine war? Has Ukraine decided, because it is losing and losing heavily to negotiate with Russia? No. Both parties are still adamant and probably believe that there could be a turning in their fortunes. What bothers me now, although it has always been there, about the events in Sudan, two things bother me. One is the descent of Sudan into ethnic configuration and ethnic conflicts, ethnic catastrophe. That bothers me because give the devil his due, the troops of the is it revolutionary? I can't even remember what they call themselves now. Had been used when there was peace to maintain peace in different parts of Sudan amongst competing ethnic groups. They've been used to sustain peace. Now those troops have been pulled out to go and fight the armed forces in Khartoum, about who is going to take over Khartoum, now leaving a vacuum in all those places in Sudan where they had maintained the peace. And there is a danger that the slightest misunderstanding or the slightest provocation in this part of Sudan, since there will now be no interlocutor, no mediator, will actually spark off bigger conflicts. We saw it happen in the Congo, in Zaire, in those days, where once Katanga decided it was going to secede, you then started having different parts and different prime ministers were coming up. And until Katanga's secession was brought to a conclusion, was defeated, you couldn't kind of reconfigure peace in the Zaire or in Congo, as it was called at that time. So that's the first thing that worries me. The second is how there may now be a spillover of this conflict into surrounding countries, countries that surround the Sudan. For example, next door to us here in the northern part of Nigeria is Chad. Chad had been in a delicate balance with its own domestic problems and instability. And now, in all the borderline areas, it's been overwhelmed by the influx of refugees spilling over from the Sudan. What is going to be the consequence of this for Sudan? I mean, for Chad. And if Chad starts to wobble, what is the implication of this for the northeastern part of Nigeria? Because I expect that then there are going to be refugees spilling over in that area and the Boko Haram people are still there. What is going to be the implication of that? So, and my fear for Nigeria is also my fear for Southern Sudan, which again is just getting over the consequences of its own civil war. Now, it's been destabilized by the influx of it's bad news for Sudan, it's bad news for Africa. And we're a long way. We're a long way from the imposition of the Saudi Arabian peace in that area. I mean, because the troops are too well armed on both sides than for you to say there will be an imposition like what we did in ECOMOG in Liberia and in Sierra Leone. I don't think that Saudi Arabia has the capacity to do that in the Sudan. It will have to probably be United States plus uh, uh, um, um, Egypt plus Saudi Arabia plus Russia, and you know that's not likely to happen, not as long as the war in Ukraine is going on. It will have to be a combination of the capacities of those countries before you can impose some peace in the Sudan.
So there's a very interesting question that I want to pose to you tonight. I think 3 weeks ago or thereabout, when we were talking about what we think the new administration in Nigeria should do about their foreign policy. One of the things that we touched on, I think it was the first of the 3-week town hall session, was the building of a military-industrial complex, and the fact that that would significantly raise the profile of Nigeria as a country. So on the one hand, I'm thinking about that. And then the news that's just come out today about South Africa, where the United States has said that they have intelligence or evidence, as we may want to call it, that South Africa provided weapons to Russia in December at the beginning of the war with Ukraine. What do you say to that when you see, one, building that military-industrial complex, two, we're now seeing South Africa with some ammunition that they've loaded onto a cargo ship and has gone to, is that the kind of thing you were referring to, or is it different?
What you do with the product of your military industrial complex is totally different. You may have it for defensive purposes. You may have it in order to project your interests externally. South Africa does have a military industrial complex. And in this case, it's decided, we don't know the details about it. And this is the issue with, you know, this, with military, with in the military sphere, it's always all shrouded in security and in mystery. We don't know the details. Did they sell it? Was it in exchange for oil? We just don't know. But obviously, South Africa took the decision that it was going to sell, or it was going to give weapons to Russia. If Nigeria does ever have a military industrial complex, what it will do with it would depend on the specificity of the situation that it confronts, whether it will use it to deal with its own internal security problems, and it has a lot of them, or whether it will use products there to support its allies in any situation that may arise on the continent of Africa. You know, the call will have to be made by the president based on advice from the security forces. I know that this is not a town hall format or session, but honestly, I think, I will welcome, I mean, uh, I will welcome any of our members of this platform. I welcome interjections from them, either in form of questions posed or their own contribution. I think I thoroughly enjoyed the town hall format that perhaps if you have any indication people want to interject, you will entertain them.
Yes, I will do that, sir. To our viewers, please just raise your hand. The team will have a look and notify me that you've raised your hand, and I'll be happy to take questions from everyone. Please just introduce yourself, very short introduction, your name, and straight to your question, and then we can move on from there. So please raise your hand, and as soon as I get the notification, I will bring you in to ask your question. Question.
There's already somebody.
I think that was, let me see. Yes, I can see a hand there. Bear with me 1 second.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. My name is Ibrahim Waziri. I'm calling from Abuja. Thank you very much for the privilege of being a student on this forum. I'd like to know from Prof, what would you think should be the focus of our incoming government in terms of our foreign policy? Is it economics? Is it citizen diplomacy? Is it African integration? Pardon me, but not being a practitioner in that field, I'm quite confused as to what the current foreign policy thrust of our country, of our government. What is it that we are looking for in relation with other members of the international community? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alhaji Waziri. A short answer to your question will be, see what Saudi Arabia is doing in the Middle East, in the Mediterranean. And that will give you an indication of what we should be doing in Africa on problems on the African continent. I wouldn't expect that Nigeria will ever be in a position where countries like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Spain will be competing with Nigeria to exercise influence in resolving African issues. I hope that the incoming administration will position Nigeria economically and militarily to exercise influence and be able to extend the Pax Nigeriana, a Nigerian peace, wherever there may be instability in Africa. I will not even segmentalize the issue the way you've done, because you cannot clap with an empty hand. You must build up the domestic base of your economy. And that's really what the moderator made reference to, that in the very first issue that we discussed was the establishment of a military industrial complex in Nigeria. We must, number one, be able to feed our people. We must be able to grow our gross domestic product. We must be able to sell our oil and gas into the European market, so the resources of it could be used to build our schools, hospitals, and this again, this what do you call it, Ajaokuta? Because without production of steel, you cannot develop industries if you are really serious. So but as I've always said on this program, let us thank God that we are not a banana republic. It's not a question of if we put our act, if we get our act together, we cannot do all of these things. It's not either or. It's not that we can, if we use money to buy to buy rice, then we will not have any money left to develop our secondary school system or our universities. If we use money to buy bread, then we cannot have money to start the military industry in, I think it is in Kaduna. No, we can do all of these things and we will still have sufficient left. But there's always a proviso I add to it, provided we stop stealing the money. I am prepared, even if you are going to criticize me for this, I am prepared to let people take 10%, still 10%, provided 90% of the budget is then used for what is voted for. What is criminal and abominable is when people steal 90% and then there's only 10% left that cannot even construct the window of a hospital that is supposed to be built.
Thank you for that, sir. And to the last person that asked, Alaji, I've just put a link in the chat window. 3 sessions ago in the town hall, we dealt with designing a foreign policy agenda for the new administration. So I would recommend you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. You would see all the past videos on that YouTube channel as well. So that link is right there.
71 participants.
Bear with me, please. That link is there in the window. I can see someone else has their hand raised up. I will allow you to please go ahead now and ask your question. Are you there? It's Emperor Felix Jr. I don't know if I got that right. All right, I think the person may have dropped off. Sir, one question around the South Africa and the provision of weapons potentially, based on what the United States is saying. What impact is that going to have on South Africa with regards to their relation with the rest of Africa? And in fact, other countries in the world, do you think it's going to create a backlash for South Africa?
Well, I don't think it was a wise move, honestly. South Africa is a medium power country. It's not a global power. The United States can create problems for South Africa. I don't think it is in my place as an African scholar to point fingers at the domestic problems that South Africa has. Because we all know the problems that it has. And I think at this point in time, I know South Africa is a member of BRICS, but at this point in time, when NATO and Russia are at loggerheads, and loggerheads militarily, I I don't think it was wise for for South Africa to have extended its support for Russia to the extent of supplying weapons to Russia. I don't think it was wise. But number one, it's going to create problems like the way you phrase your question, in terms of the African Union maintaining whatever position it decides to take on this Russian-Ukrainian war. If, what has happened is that because of the lack of leadership by Nigeria, South Africa has felt it can do whatever it feels like, not only on the Ukrainian war, but on any matter on the global stage. I believe that if Nigeria gets its act together under the incoming administration, South Africa may then find itself head-on clash with Nigeria, or those that believe, like Nigeria, that there is a limit, there's a line that you should draw in getting entangled with problems and conflicts which actually should not be on the front burner for Africa. Now, after all, as I said, I don't think it was a wise move. Badly advised.
All right, sir. I can once. Bear with me. I can see Bodiola Jumoke with your hand raised, but I think that there is another device there. You need to turn one of those devices off, or at least put the speaker on mute, so that we're not getting the feedback that we're getting now. So Bode Olajumoke, and apologies, I can't see the faces, I can see the names. So if you want to...
Distinguished Senator Olajumoke.
Okay, sir. Good evening, sir. Can you unmute yourself now, sir?
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Honestly, I want to thank Professor Bolaji on the comment he just made as to South Africa taking advantage of Nigeria not being, appropriately placing its priority. I'm aware that currently South Africa has challenges with regards to power. Was it yesterday that I was talking to my son, who is in South Africa? They've been having challenges I thought we have problems here in Nigeria, but he mentioned to me that South Africa is having enormous, for about 10 hours in a day, they were not able to supply electricity. So how would South Africa get itself involved in supplying arms to Soviet Union? It's unfortunate, but I do believe that maybe by the time Nigeria gets its act right and we assume our rightful position in Africa, South Africa would be put in its proper place. But it's unwise of South Africa to have done that. I don't know for what purpose, whether they sold it to Russia or not, but South Africa hasn't got the capacity to do that. Thank you very much.
Have we lost sound?
Can you hear me, sir?
Well, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay, sorry, sir. I was saying that one last question that I want to put to you, because we've run out of time, but I want to put this one forward. The United Kingdom has announced that they will be supplying long-range weapons, missiles specifically, to Ukraine. And Russia has said they were going to take the appropriate military response to that. When is aiding a country going too far, like the UK is doing, that could then potentially expose the UK to an attack from Russia? And do you see a military attack from Russia against the United Kingdom for this move?
Well, what I will say is welcome to Third World War, if that really happens. I don't know how much consultation there has been between the United Kingdom and NATO and the United States before moving this far. I thought the strategy of NATO, agreed to by the United States, is that it's defensive weapons that will be made available to Ukraine, and not any weapon that can reach into the territory of Russia, because that then, that then poses existential problems to Russia. And we should again not forget, and please, anyway, we've discussed this on this program. I am not a supporter of Russia. I think what Russia has done in Ukraine is beyond reproach. And I don't believe that Russia has any justification for doing what it has done. But Russia is still a superpower, even if not a superpower, a global power. It has nuclear weapons, it has supersonic planes, it has missiles, cruise missiles, it has missiles that can reach the United States. And don't forget Article 5 of the NATO Charter. And an attack on one is an attack on all. So even if Russia then decides to bomb Britain because of the supply of these long-range missiles to Ukraine, all NATO members are under a legal obligation, a charter obligation, to come to the defense of the United Kingdom. And defense under these circumstances means attacking Russia back, not just supplying weapons to Britain and leaving Britain alone to face. I just hope these things will not get this far. It's getting out of hand. And this is the warning which some of us have been warning, some of us, the flag some of us have been raising. I hope that, again, the Pope and now China, that seems to be on the verge of being a mediator, and Brazil will get their acts together and let us ensure that this madness comes to a stop.
Thank you very much, sir. We've definitely gone over time. Apologies for that. I will, please, we'll be back same time next week, 7 p.m. Africa time. But thank you very much for tonight, sir. Thank you to our viewers. I'm sorry if I was not able to get to you and you had your hand raised up. Apologies for that, but we'll be back same time next week. Good night, everyone. Good night, sir.
Good night. Thank you.